Your grandmother never called it a recipe. She called it Tuesday. She called it whatever is in the pantry. She called it sit down and eat. Number 14 was invented by millions of women at the same time, and none of them wrote it down. Number 2 was pork on a stick pretending to be chicken, and everyone kept the secret. Number 1 has no name at all. These are 20 poor man suppers from the 1950s America no longer remembers. Hit subscribe because at least one of these will taste like your childhood. Let us count them down. 20. Ring bologna and fried potatoes. Ring bologna sliced into coins, fried in a cast iron skillet with potatoes and onions until the edges caramelized. Every Midwest city had its brand. Milwaukee had Usinger's. Flint had Kogel's. The Twin Cities had Schweigert. Brand loyalty was inherited from your mother. One ring cost 30 to 40 cents and fed a family of 5. The smoky, garlicky fat from the bologna seeped into the potatoes and flavored everything. By the 1980s, the local producers began to close. The specific taste of each city's Wednesday night disappeared with them. Nobody noticed until it was too late. When families moved away from the Midwest, they had ring bologna shipped to them because nothing at the new grocery store tasted the same. The product connected immigrants to their heritage and neighbors to each other. When it vanished, something deeper than a Wednesday supper vanished with it. 19. Creamed peas. On toast, canned peas, folded into a white sauce of butter, flour, and milk, poured over toast. Under 40 cents for a supper, feeding 4. The white sauce transformed canned peas from a side dish into the main event. It was so ordinary that nobody remembered making it until decades later, when the taste surfaced like a ghost from childhood. A mother might write in her meal plan, "Creamed peas tonight." Nobody complained. Nobody asked for more. It was Wednesday, and everyone ate it. The white sauce was the only thing standing between a single can of peas and going to bed hungry. 18. Macaroni and tomatoes. Elbow macaroni tossed with heated canned tomatoes, butter, and a pinch of sugar to cut the acid. Under 40 cents and ready in 15 minutes. It required no technique, no timing, no skill. The macaroni took exactly as long as the tomatoes took to heat. It was utilitarian and reliable, and the opposite of memorable, which was exactly the point. Today, Italian restaurants serve pasta with pomodoro for $14 to $18. This was the poverty version of the same concept for 35 cents. Nobody in 1953 called it cuisine. They called it what we are having because there is nothing else. 17. Cheese Dreams bread, topped with a slice of American cheese and broiled until bubbly and golden. Under 30 cents to feed a family. The name appeared in dozens of 1950s community cookbooks and PTA recipe collections. Why dream about cheese when you could eat it? By the 1970s, the name evaporated completely. The dish survived as open-faced cheese toast, but never as Cheese Dreams again. A whole generation of mothers used that name, and then it was just gone. The cheese survived. The dream did not. 16. Beans and wieners. Canned beans simmered with sliced hot dogs, a spoonful of mustard, and a pinch of brown sugar. Under 50 cents for a family of 5. This was the after-school meal, what was waiting when children came home hungry at 3 in the afternoon. The hot dogs made it feel like dinner instead of just canned beans. It sat on the stove for hours without spoiling. School cafeterias served it in rotation. An entire generation ate it monthly and barely remembers it now. The taste was not remarkable. The frequency was. Everywhere, then nowhere. 15. Fried bologna sliced thick and fried in a skillet until the edges turned crispy and brown. 30 to 40 cents for a meal. They called it the working man's steak. A factory worker could not afford real steak. But if he fried bologna crispy enough and gave it enough crust, it approximated the experience. The joke was that calling it steak was absurd. The truth was that it tasted good and it was all he could afford. The sizzle in the pan, the crispy edges, the smokiness. That memory lives in men who grew up eating it for lunch and never stopped calling it steak. 14. Spanish rice ground beef, onion, canned tomatoes, rice, and chili powder, all cooked in a single skillet. under 80 cents, and it fed 6. The name had nothing to do with Spain or Mexico. It was a 1950s American invention using the only exotic spice most kitchens had. But it opened a door. For millions of suburban families, Spanish rice was the first time chili powder entered the house. It was inaccurate and oversimplified, and it introduced an entire generation to the idea that rice could taste like something. By the 1980s, Americans discovered real Mexican food, and Spanish rice quietly disappeared. Here is the thing nobody says about the 1950s kitchen. It ran on white sauce, butter, flour, milk, heat. That was the formula that turned canned peas into supper, turned eggs into a main course, turned chipped beef into something a family would sit down and eat. White sauce was not a recipe. It was a technology. A mother who could make a white sauce could feed her family from whatever the pantry held. Canned vegetables became creamed vegetables. Hard-boiled eggs became goldenrod eggs. A jar of dried beef became the meal that fed 16 million veterans and their families. Every dish in the top half of this list begins with butter melted in a pan and flour stirred in. That one technique was the most important cooking skill in 1950s America, and nobody teaches it anymore. 13. Tomato gravy. On biscuits, butter and flour made into a roux, then canned or fresh tomatoes stirred in with a pinch of sugar, poured over hot biscuits. Under 25 cents. This was the supper of rural Appalachia. Families who grew their own tomatoes in summer, canned them in August, and lived on them through winter. Fresh in summer, preserved in winter, but always the same ritual. By the 1960s, grocery stores reached every hollow in Appalachia. Younger people moved to cities. Elderly grandmothers kept making tomato gravy the way their mothers made it, measuring nothing, needing no recipe, and teaching no one. 12. Shipwreck casserole. Sliced potatoes, sliced onions, and raw ground beef layered in a casserole dish, covered with canned tomatoes, and baked for an hour and a half. Under $1, and it fed 6. The name was honest. It looked like a wreck. It was assembled like a wreck, but it worked. You layered everything raw, poured tomatoes over it, and put it in the oven. No technique, no finesse, no pretense. An hour later, dinner was ready. By the 1980s, shipwreck casserole became a symbol of everything sophisticated cooks wanted to forget about the 1950s. But for the families who ate it, there was nothing to be embarrassed about. It fed 6 people for under $1. That is not a wreck. That is engineering. 11. Scalloped potatoes and hot dogs. Sliced potatoes and hot dog coins layered in a casserole dish, covered in white sauce, and baked for an hour until golden and bubbly, under 50 cents. Betty Crocker published the recipe, which gave it legitimacy. If Betty Crocker said hot dogs in a casserole were acceptable, then they were acceptable. Mothers traded variations in church cookbooks. Some added cheese on top. Some used cream of mushroom soup instead of white sauce. The dish was the budget version of scalloped potatoes and ham, because hot dogs were what you could afford. It survives on vintage recipe websites described as the meal my mom made every week when money was tight, which was most weeks. 10. American chop suey elbow macaroni, ground beef, and canned tomatoes mixed in a skillet. Under 90 cents, and it fed 6. The name suggested Chinese cuisine, but the dish was entirely American. It appeared on school cafeteria menus monthly, and nobody found it remarkable. Outside New England, the dish barely survives. In Massachusetts and Rhode Island, it remains known, but nationally, it has nearly disappeared. A generation of school children who ate it in cafeterias simply stopped eating it as adults. Nobody missed it. Nobody mourned it. It just quietly stopped appearing. 9. Salmon loaf. Canned salmon mixed with breadcrumbs and eggs, formed into a loaf, baked, and served with white sauce. Under 50 cents. Before Vatican II eliminated the no meat on Friday rule. In 1962, salmon loaf was the Friday supper for millions of Catholic families. Canned salmon was cheap and often government provided. The white sauce made it feel like a real meal. For a generation of Catholic Americans, The taste of canned salmon bound with breadcrumbs is forever linked to Friday night and childhood. The church changed the rule. The taste memory never did. 8. Creamed eggs. On toast. Hard-boiled eggs sliced into a white sauce, poured over toast, with grated egg yolk sprinkled on top like gold dust. Under 25 cents. They called it goldenrod eggs. The grated yolk added nothing nutritionally, but it made the dish look intentional and special. Every home economics class in America taught this as a fundamental skill. One woman wrote decades later that she had forgotten the dish for 40 years until the smell of butter and flour brought it all back. The technique survives in French cooking. The Midwestern version has vanished completely. Nobody teaches goldenrod eggs in school anymore. 7. Welsh rarebit sharp cheddar melted into a white sauce with Worcestershire, egg yolk, and a pinch of cayenne, poured over toast. Under 60 cents. They called it the poor man's rabbit, though it had nothing to do with rabbit. It was a lunch counter standard in the 1950s, the meal working men ordered when they needed something rich and filling and fast. By the 1970s, hamburgers replaced it on every lunch counter menu in America. The generations that ate Welsh rarebit regularly have largely passed away, taking the taste with them. The lunch counters closed. The rarebit went with them. Nobody ordered it because nobody was left who remembered what it was. Here is what connected every one of these suppers. A woman standing in a kitchen at 5 in the afternoon with less than $1 and 4 people to feed. She did not consult a cookbook. She opened the pantry, looked at what she had, and made a decision. Canned peas and milk meant creamed peas on toast. A package of hot dogs and a bag of potatoes meant the poor man's meal. A jar of chipped beef meant SOS. The decision took seconds. The meal took 15 minutes. The family ate. Nobody talked about it because there was nothing to talk about. It was just supper. It was just what happened every night in working-class America when the money ran out before the week did. These women were not cooking. They were solving equations. And the answer was always enough. 6. Creamed chipped beef. On toast, dried chipped beef torn into pieces and cooked in a white sauce of butter, flour, and milk, ladled over toast. Under 50 cents. The military called it something unprintable. 16 million men who served in World War II came home knowing how to make exactly one thing. Their wives adopted it because it was fast, cheap, and their husbands ate it without complaint. The dish connected the home kitchen to the war. Children learned the military nickname from their fathers, usually accompanied by a story about the Army or the Navy. By the 1980s, jars of dried chipped beef became hard to find on grocery shelves. The soldiers' supper faded with the generation that served. 16 million men brought that recipe home, and their wives made it for 30 years. Then the men grew old, and their wives stopped cooking, and the jars disappeared from the shelves. The war ended. The recipe followed it out the door. 5. Swiss steak. Round steak pounded with a meat tenderizer, dredged in flour, browned, and braised in canned tomatoes and onions for 2 hours. Under $1. This was the 1950s mother's magic trick, turning the cheapest, toughest cut of beef into something tender enough to cut with a fork. The pounding was physical and satisfying. Some mothers admitted they took out the day's frustrations on the round steak. Reynolds Wrap featured Swiss steak in advertisements. By the 1970s, better cuts of beef became affordable, and the need to beat cheap meat into submission disappeared. Swiss steak vanished not because it was bad, but because it was no longer necessary. The women who pounded that meat knew something about transforming the impossible into the edible. That knowledge quietly left the kitchen when they did. 4. Tamale pie ground. Beef with canned tomatoes, corn, and chili powder, topped with cornbread batter and baked until golden. Under 75 cents. Real tamales require hours of preparation. Corn husks, masa harina, and techniques passed through generations of Mexican cooking. Tamale pie required opening cans and mixing batter. It was the 1950s American kitchen's attempt at foreign food, inaccurate, simplified, and vaguely offensive to anyone who had eaten a real tamale. but it was also the first step. For millions of suburban families, tamale pie was the door through which they walked toward accepting Mexican cuisine. The door was clumsy, but it opened, and America walked through it and never looked back. 3. Liver and onions. Beef liver soaked in milk, dredged in flour, and fried with caramelized onions. Under 40 cents. Every 1950s child knew the smell. That distinctive metallic, slightly sweet aroma that announced supper before anyone could see it. Children began their objections from the next room. Mothers served it because doctors told them to. Eat your liver, it is good for you. The irony is that the doctors were right. Liver is among the most nutritious foods on earth. But being right did not make it taste better. By the 1980s, doctors stopped recommending it. Without the medical mandate, mothers stopped buying it. Liver and onions vanished from American supper tables in a single generation. It survives only in old-fashioned diners and in the memories of people who can still smell it from 50 years away. The most hated supper in 1950s, America was also the most nutritious. Nobody wanted to hear that then. Nobody wants to hear it now. 2. City chicken cubes of pork threaded onto wooden skewers, breaded, fried, and braised until tender. Under 60 cents. It was not chicken. During the Depression, chicken cost more per pound than pork. Polish and Eastern European immigrants in Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and Detroit created the dish so they could serve chicken on Sundays without the cost. Everyone knew it was pork. Nobody said it out loud. The collective pretense was the point. A community agreeing to call pork chicken because the aspiration mattered as much as the reality. By the 1960s, industrial chicken farming made real chicken cheap, and city chicken became unnecessary. But the people who grew up eating it remember the wooden skewers, the crispy breading, the tender pork inside, and the moment they realized as adults that it was never chicken at all. The pretense was finally over. But the taste stayed with them forever. 1. The poor man's meal. Potatoes peeled and diced, an onion chopped, hot dogs sliced into coins, everything fried together in bacon grease in a cast iron skillet. 30 to 40 cents. That was the entire recipe. It had no proper name because it was never named. It was just what happened on the nights when there was nothing else. A mother opened the potato bin, peeled 4 or 5, diced an onion, sliced some hot dogs, and fried it all together. The children ate it from plates or straight from the pan. Nobody asked what it was called. Nobody wrote it down. It existed in the space between meals and survival. Not fancy enough to be a recipe. Not desperate enough to be a story. Yet it was eaten more frequently than any named dish in 1950s working-class America. The poor man's meal is the most democratic food in American history. It does not belong to any region, any ethnicity, any tradition. It belongs to poverty itself. Every family that could not afford a proper supper made some version of it. The specifics varied. Hot dogs or bologna, potatoes diced or sliced, ketchup or mustard. But the principle was universal. Fry potatoes, add the cheapest meat you have, feed your family. This meal has no cookbook entry. No food blog revival, no TikTok moment. It exists only in the memory of people who ate it as children and recognized it, decades later, as love disguised as poverty. Make one of these this week. Just one. The creamed eggs on toast, the Swiss steak, the fried bologna. Buy the ingredients for a couple of dollars and cook something that got a 1950s family through a Wednesday night. Sit down at the table. Set a place. Eat it slow. Tell me in the comments which one you are going to try. I want to know if city chicken still lives in someone's kitchen in Pittsburgh. I want to know if anyone's mother made cheese dreams and called them that. I want to know if the poor man's meal still has no name in your family. Because these were not just suppers. They were 20 ways a mother looked at a pantry with almost nothing in it and said, "Sit down. I will feed you." That is not poverty. That is the single most important meal ever served.